The Coronation of Edward Balliol in 1332, a turning point in Scottish history. The coronation of Edward Balliol as King of Scotland in 1332 marks a critical moment in Scottish history, occurring amid a complex web of political intrigue, dynastic struggles, and ongoing wars with England. Balliol's ascension to the Scottish throne came after a period of turmoil following the death of King Robert the Bruce in 1329, leaving Scotland vulnerable to internal conflicts and external pressures. The episode encapsulates the power dynamics between England and Scotland during the early 14th century, illustrating the fragile nature of sovereignty in a land repeatedly contested by rival factions. Background: the Bruce dynasty and its challenges. Robert the Bruce's reign, which culminated in his famous victory at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, secured Scottish independence from English control. However, the peace established by Bruce's triumph was tenuous. His death in 1329 left the throne to his young son, David II, who was only 5 years old at the time. Scotland was still recovering from the destructive wars of independence, and the king's youth presented an opportunity for those disaffected by Bruce's rule to challenge the succession. Among these challengers was Edward Balliol, the son of John Balliol, a former king of Scotland who had been deposed by Robert the Bruce. John Balliol's brief reign, 1292 to 1296, had ended in humiliation when he was forced to abdicate by the English King Edward I. Edward Balliol, seeking to restore his family's honour, became the figurehead for a faction of disinherited Scottish nobles known as the Disinherited. These nobles had lost their lands and titles under Bruce's rule and sought to reclaim them, seeing Edward Balliol as a means to achieve this. English support and invasion. Edward Balliol's claim to the Scottish throne was bolstered by the support of King Edward III of England, who had his own ambitions regarding Scotland. Edward III was eager to exploit the unrest in Scotland to reassert English dominance over its northern neighbour. By backing Balliol's bid for the crown, Edward III hoped to install a puppet monarch who would acknowledge English overlordship, thus reversing the gains Scotland had made under Robert the Bruce. In 1332, Edward Balliol, with a small force of supporters and a significant number of English troops, launched an invasion of Scotland. This invasion was one part military campaign and one part political gamble. Balliol landed in Fife, and despite being outnumbered, he achieved a surprise victory at the Battle of Duplin Moor in August 1332. The Scottish forces, loyal to David II and led by the regent, Donald, Earl of Mar, were poorly coordinated and fell victim to a devastating tactical error. Balliol's forces, although smaller, used superior positioning and tactics to crush the Scottish army. This victory left Scotland vulnerable, and Balliol marched on Scone, where he was crowned king in September 1332. Edward Balliol's crowning and its immediate consequences. Balliol's coronation at Scone was intended to legitimize his claim to the throne and establish him as the rightful ruler of Scotland. Scone, the traditional coronation site of Scottish kings, held symbolic significance. By being crowned there, Balliol sought to align himself with a long line of Scottish kings, despite the fact that his authority rested largely on English support and the presence of foreign troops on Scottish soil. However, Balliol's reign was fraught with difficulties from the beginning. He was widely regarded as a puppet of Edward III, and his legitimacy was questioned by much of the Scottish nobility, who remained loyal to the young David II. His coronation did little to win over the hearts and minds of the Scottish people, who viewed him as an illegitimate usurper. This perception was exacerbated by his willingness to cede southern Scottish lands to Edward III in exchange for military support. This move was seen as a betrayal of Scottish sovereignty, further alienating Balliol from potential supporters. Balliol's hold on power was precarious, and he soon found himself besieged by forces loyal to David II. His initial success, while spectacular, proved difficult to sustain. By December 1332, Balliol was forced to flee to England after being defeated at the Battle of Annan by forces loyal to the Bruce faction. His reign had lasted only a few months, and David II's supporters wasted no time in reasserting their control over Scotland. The long struggle for the Scottish crown. Though Balliol's first reign was short-lived, it set the stage for a prolonged struggle for the Scottish crown, known as the Second War of Scottish Independence. Edward Balliol, with continued support from Edward III, launched several further invasions into Scotland over the next decade. His efforts to reclaim the throne resulted in a series of campaigns and battles, with Balliol sometimes controlling parts of southern Scotland but never managing to secure lasting control over the entire kingdom. The broader context of these conflicts was the ongoing rivalry between England and Scotland. Edward III's backing of Balliol was part of a broader strategy to undermine Scottish independence and assert English dominance. However, the Scots, inspired by the legacy of Robert the Bruce, fiercely resisted any attempts to subjugate their kingdom to English rule. David II, although still a minor, became the symbol of Scottish resistance, and his eventual return from exile in France further solidified the Bruce claim to the throne. Legacy of Edward Balliol's coronation. Edward Balliol's coronation in 1332 is often viewed as a footnote in the larger history of Scotland's wars of independence, yet it had profound consequences. It reignited the conflict between England and Scotland, leading to years of warfare and political instability. Balliol's reliance on English support undermined his credibility as a Scottish king, and his reign became a symbol of the dangers of foreign interference in Scotland's internal affairs. In the long term, Balliol's failed bid for the throne highlighted the enduring strength of the Bruce legacy. Despite the odds, Scotland's independence was maintained, and David II would go on to rule Scotland until his death in 1371. Edward Balliol, in contrast, eventually faded from the political scene, spending his later years in relative obscurity in England. The brief reign of Edward Balliol serves as a reminder of the complex and often tumultuous relationship between England and Scotland during the medieval period. It underscores the fragility of kingship, the importance of legitimacy, and the deep-seated desire for sovereignty that drove Scotland's fight for independence throughout the 14th century. Thanks for listening. Like and comment. And please subscribe, as that will help us get more videos out to those interested in the Middle Ages. See you next time on Medieval Chronicles 1066. Stay curious.